The hum of the atmosphere generators was a dull, constant thrum, a familiar lullaby in the bustling heart of Neo Olympus Prime's central cargo bay. Gigantic, gleaming freighters, their hulls scuffed with stardust from countless jumps, dwarfed the smaller orbital shuttles and service drones darting through the cavernous space. It was a symphony of industry, a metallic ballet orchestrated by the relentless demands of interstellar commerce. For Kalen, this was simply another Tuesday. He moved with the practiced grace of a veteran, his steps precise as he navigated the maze of stacked crates and automated loaders. His freighter, the Stardust Drifter, was a standard Type C haulage vessel, reliable and unglamorous, much like Kalen himself. He'd spent the better part of 2 decades ferrying everything from exotic xenoflora to industrial-grade grav drives across the galaxy. His life was a predictable loop of deliveries, manifests, and long stretches of silent void. Solitude suited him. Order was paramount. His current consignment was routine, a single, heavily secured containment unit, designated for a high-priority delivery to the research sector on Xylos 7. The manifest simply listed its contents as classified biological research material. Nothing unusual there. The galaxy was full of secrets. Kalen ran a diagnostic scan on the lock mechanisms, his fingers dancing over the ship's internal console. The thick, reinforced uranium walls of the box reflected the ambient light, a silent, imposing cube resting squarely in his cargo hold. As the console confirmed all systems were nominal, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the Drifter's deck plating. Kalen paused, attributing it to a distant loader or perhaps a minor atmospheric disturbance. Then it happened. A tiny, terrified whisper, barely audible above the ship's ambient hum, seemed to emanate directly from the box. It wasn't a sound his ship's comms system registered, nor did it register on any internal microphones. It was a thought, an impression, a voice that pierced through the metal and straight into his consciousness. "Don't tell them I'm here." Kalen froze, his hand hovering over the console. He was a man of logic, of empirical data and verifiable facts. Ghosts and psychic phenomena were not part of his universe. He shook his head, a wry, self-deprecating smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Fatigue, he decided. Too many jumps, too little sleep. He'd been running a tight schedule, pushing the drifter harder than usual. The mind played tricks when deprived of rest. He ran the external diagnostics again, this time focusing on sensor anomalies and psychological feedback loops within his own interface. Nothing. The box remained an inert, silent rectangle of metal. Yet the whisper echoed, a frail, desperate plea that resonated deep within him, unsettling the stoic calm he had carefully cultivated over years. He stared at the box, a growing unease coiling in his gut. This was no routine delivery anymore. This was something else entirely. Before you proceed, remember to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories from the cosmos. Kalen squeezed his eyes shut, then opened them again, peering intently at the reinforced container. His internal ship diagnostics, usually infallible, showed nothing amiss. No biological signatures, no internal vibrations beyond the expected, no energy fluctuations that would indicate a sentient presence. He even cycled his personal neuroscanners, searching for any residual psychic feedback or environmental interference that might be causing auditory hallucinations. The results were unequivocally negative. Yet, the chilling conviction that the voice was real gnawed at him. He tried to rationalize it away, muttering aloud to the empty cargo bay. "Just a glitch, Kalen, you're hearing things." The words felt hollow, even to his own ears. He turned his back on the box, walking purposefully to the cockpit, determined to dismiss the incident as a product of his overtaxed mind. He checked the flight plan, confirming their trajectory towards Xylos 7. The delivery to the research facility was scheduled for 0800 hours Standard Galactic Time. It was a heavily guarded installation, notorious for its secrecy, and the whispers of ethically ambiguous alien studies conducted within its shielded walls. This facility, known only as the Xylos Institute for Xenobiological Advancement, was the ultimate obstacle. It was a place where things went in and rarely came out, especially if they were classified as specimens. The thought sent an unexpected shiver down his spine. The voice, faint as it was, had a desperate quality that now seemed inextricably linked to the Institute's ominous reputation. He pictured the box, cold and unyielding, and felt a pang of something he rarely experienced, unease. He ran a full system-wide diagnostic on the Stardust Drifter, scrutinizing every line of code, every sensor reading. He even recalibrated the primary audio receptors, convinced that some obscure frequency might have picked up a stray signal. The ship's AI, a robust and entirely logical entity named Orion, confirmed all systems were operating within optimal parameters. Anomaly detected 0. Orion's calm, synthesized voice reported. All environmental and internal sensors indicate cargo bay integrity and contents are stable. Kalen leaned back in his pilot's chair, running a hand over his tired face. Orion, run a scan for localized psionic echoes within the cargo bay. Prioritize against known sentient frequencies. He knew it was a long shot, bordering on ridiculous, but he had to try. Orion processed the request with its characteristic efficiency. A soft whirring sound indicated the activation of the highly specialized, rarely used psionic dampeners and detectors. After several tense moments, Orion's voice cut through the silence. Negative, Kalen. No psionic signatures detected. Are you experiencing system aberrations, or perhaps a psychological stress event? Orion's concern, though artificial, was palpable. Just checking, Orion, Kalen grumbled, though his gaze kept drifting back to the cargo bay access hatch. He couldn't shake the chilling conviction that the voice was real, a tiny, terrified plea echoing in his mind, persistent and growing slightly clearer with each passing moment. He tried to ignore it, to focus on the rhythmic pulse of the Drifter's engines, on the distant pinpricks of light that were other starships traversing the void. But the voice persisted, a fragile whisper that seemed to penetrate the very fabric of his ship, and more disturbingly, his own carefully constructed stoicism. Please, it whispered again. Don't tell them I'm here. They'll do things. The last phrase was a mere breath, a tremble of pure, unadulterated fear. Kalen felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. This was no glitch, no fatigue. This was real. And he was carrying it, straight into the maw of a nightmare. The cold dread deepened its grip, twisting Kalen's gut with an unfamiliar intensity. He was no stranger to fear, having faced pirates and stellar storms, but this was different, a visceral, empathetic terror for something unseen, something vulnerable. He pressed a hand to his temple, as if to physically push away the insistent whisper, but it only grew stronger, weaving itself into the very rhythm of his thoughts. The voice, now slightly steadier, though still laced with desperation, introduced herself. My name is Lyra. I was taken. They put me in here. Her words painted a stark, terrifying picture without revealing much detail. She described a sensation of profound darkness, of muffled sounds and a constant, low thrumming that she believed was the box's internal dampeners, designed to isolate her from any external stimuli. She spoke of the chilling silence that followed, punctuated only by the distant, disembodied voices of her captors discussing her unique properties and processing for study. These brief, fragmented revelations were punctuated by shudders of pure fear that Kalen felt resonate within his own mind, a shared dread that transcended language barriers. Lyra's descriptions were vague, perhaps deliberately so, or perhaps limited by her current sensory deprivation. She spoke of a feeling of being constantly observed, even in the dark, and of a gnawing hunger that wasn't for food, but for connection, for any touch of another sentient mind. They want to understand how I influence things, she whispered, her voice barely a thread. They call it psionic resonance. But it's just me. How I exist. Kalen, a creature of logic and order, found his carefully constructed worldview crumbling around him. His entire life had been governed by clear rules, by the unimpeachable authority of the Galactic Trade Federation's laws and regulations. Deliver the cargo, ensure its safety, get paid. Simple. Now, he was faced with a moral dilemma that tore at the very fabric of his being. His duty compelled him to complete the delivery, to hand over this living, terrified being to a facility notorious for its questionable ethics. His growing empathy, however, screamed against it. His logical mind, honed by years of interstellar commerce, presented him with an insurmountable wall of facts. Interfering with classified cargo was a felony of the highest order, punishable by severe fines and potentially the loss of his livelihood, his ship, and his freedom. He could rationalize that Lyra's plight, while tragic, was not his concern. He was a cargo pilot, not a liberator. Yet the small, insistent voice in his head, a voice that sounded increasingly like Lyra's, challenged every one of these rationalizations. He found himself pacing the cockpit, his arguments with an invisible prisoner growing more heated, though only in his own mind. He ran scenarios, contingency plans, escape routes, all theoretical, all immediately discarded as too risky, too impossible. The Stardust Drifter was a hauler, not a warship. He was a pilot, not a hero. Then, a new sensation. A flicker in the ship's overhead lights, a momentary stutter in the low hum of the engine, quickly corrected, almost imperceptible. Kalen frowned, checking the diagnostics panel. No anomalies. But Lyra's voice, now with a new, hesitant strength, echoed in his mind. I did that. I can reach out. It's faint, very faint through the dampeners. But I think I can nudge things. Small things. If you let me. The implication hit Kalen with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just a captive alien. This was a captive alien with unique, active abilities that could subtly interact with his ship's systems. His perspective shifted dramatically. He was no longer just a delivery man, a passive observer in a tragic drama. He was now, by virtue of Lyra's mere presence and her burgeoning influence, a potential accomplice, either to her imprisonment or to her escape. The weight of this realization settled heavily on his shoulders. The journey to Xylos 7 had just become infinitely more complicated. The journey to Xylos 7 had indeed become infinitely more complicated, the cold dread now mixed with a frantic sense of responsibility. As the Stardust Drifter approached the orbital exclusion zone of Xylos 7, the research facility's imposing silhouette grew larger on the viewscreen, a metallic spider clinging to the planet's surface. Lyra's panic, which Kalen felt as a sharp, piercing anxiety in his own mind, escalated dramatically. "They're waiting for me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They'll take me to the processing labs. They'll cut me open to see how I work." The images she projected into Kalen's mind were vivid, terrifying glimpses of sterile rooms, harsh lights, and instruments he didn't recognize but understood to be tools of invasive examination. She described the cold, hard surfaces and the crushing loneliness of complete confinement, urging Kalen to find a way, any way, to free her before it was too late. Her pleas were desperate, tearing at Kalen's carefully constructed emotional walls. He could no longer simply ignore her. Her terror was palpable, almost a shared experience. As the Drifter initiated its automated docking procedures, Kalen engaged the ship's internal comms, switching to a secured, tightly encrypted channel that only Lyra, through her subtle influence, could theoretically access. He spoke softly, his voice low and steady, trying to project a calm he didn't entirely feel. "Lyra, listen to me. I need more information. What exactly are they studying? What makes you so special that they would go to such lengths?" He tried to keep his tone neutral, clinical, hoping it would encourage her to elaborate without further terrifying her. She responded in fragmented thoughts and brief, hesitant sentences, describing her species' innate ability to manipulate the ambient energy fields that permeated the universe, a power they used for communication, healing, and subtle environmental shaping, never for harm. She explained that her people were pacifists, often mistaken for non-sentient life forms due to their unique, nonverbal forms of expression and deep connection to their home world. She had been on a sacred pilgrimage, alone, when she was captured. The facility wanted to weaponize her abilities, to understand the source of her psionic resonance, and replicate it. The drifter docked with a barely perceptible jolt, the automated clamps securing the freighter to the station's access port. Almost immediately, the ship's external sensors indicated a security scan in progress. Kalen watched the monitor as 3 armed guards, clad in the sleek, intimidating uniforms of the Xylos Institute's private security force, approached his cargo bay hatch from the external corridor cameras. Their presence was a stark reminder of the danger he was in, and more importantly, the danger Lyra faced. He felt his heart rate quicken, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow. He forced himself to take a deep, steadying breath, his hands gripping the controls of his pilot's chair. "Security inspection, Lyra," he whispered mentally. "Stay absolutely silent. Do not make a sound, do not even think too loudly." He hoped his mental communication was clear enough. The cargo bay hatch hissed open, revealing the steely-eyed guards. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a permanent scowl, stepped inside, his energy rifle held loosely but purposefully. "Standard inspection, pilot," he grunted, his voice devoid of warmth. "State your cargo and destination manifest verbally." Kalen recited the information, his voice remarkably steady despite the tremor in his hands, which he kept hidden beneath the console. One of the other guards began sweeping the cargo bay with a portable scanner, its beam passing over every crate, every piece of equipment, lingering for a moment too long on the secured container housing Lyra. Kalen felt Lyra's terror spike, a sharp, almost painful jolt in his mind. He clenched his jaw, trying to project reassurance, trying to shield her with his own mental presence. He maintained a neutral expression, even as the scanner chirped reassuringly, indicating no illicit contraband. The guard moved on, seemingly satisfied. "All right, pilot. Standard procedure complete. We'll send a transport team for the priority package within the hour. Do not attempt to move it." The lead guard's eyes narrowed slightly, as if attempting to peer into Kalen's thoughts. Kalen simply nodded, offering a tight, professional smile. The guards exited, the hatch hissing shut behind them. Kalen slumped back in his chair, a breath he hadn't realized he was holding escaping in a long, shaky sigh. He had passed the first test, but the true delivery, the true challenge, loomed. He could feel Lyra's gratitude, a wave of profound relief, but it was quickly overshadowed by the renewed surge of existential dread. They were coming for her. And he, Kalen, the stoic cargo pilot, was delivering her directly into their hands. The weight of his impending betrayal was suffocating. The weight of his impending betrayal was suffocating, a bitter taste in Kalen's mouth that even the sterile air of the facility couldn't cleanse. Within minutes of the security team's departure from his ship, a specialized transport crew arrived, their movements precise and efficient, their faces expressionless behind their environmental helms. They loaded the heavily secured box onto a grav sled designed for high-value cargo, its anti-grav emitters humming softly. Kalen followed them, his footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the polished corridors, the clank of his boots a stark contrast to the almost silent glide of the grav sled. He felt Lyra's fear as a low thrum against his own consciousness, a constant frantic pulse that spoke of impending doom. The facility itself was a masterpiece of cold, corporate architecture, gleaming white walls, strategically placed security cameras that seemed to follow his every move, and doors that sealed with an unnerving hiss, each one a barrier between Lyra and any hope of freedom. Every corner they turned, every security checkpoint they passed, reinforced the bleak reality of Lyra's situation. This wasn't just a research facility, it was a fortress, designed to contain and control. The sterile, almost clinical environment felt like a tomb, devoid of life and warmth, making Lyra's whispered pleas for escape even more heartbreaking. Kalen felt a growing sense of complicity, each step taking him further into this dehumanizing labyrinth. They reached an access control point, a massive durasteel door marked Restricted Research Sector, Level 7. The lead transport tech swiped an access card, and the door slid open with a mechanical groan that seemed to mirror the one in Kalen's soul. Inside, the atmosphere was different. Hushed, intense, filled with the low murmur of scientific instrumentation and the occasional sharp clatter of equipment. Kalen saw figures in white lab coats, moving with purpose, their faces grim, their gazes often fixed on data panels and holographic displays. As the grav sled paused near a transfer bay, Kalen overheard snippets of conversation, clinical terms that cut him to the bone. Specimen 7's vitals are stable, but its energy output remains erratic, a woman's voice stated, devoid of any empathy. We need to begin the neural mapping sequence immediately to understand the full scope of its psionic capabilities. Another voice, a deeper, male tone, responded. Agreed. The board expects results. This resource is too valuable to remain unquantified. Specimen 7. Kalen felt Lyra wince, a mental flinch of pure humiliation and despair. The dehumanization was complete. She wasn't an individual, a sentient being with fears and hopes. She was an object, a resource to be exploited. Kalen's gut twisted. The words hung in the air, cold and sharp, confirming all of Lyra's deepest fears. He felt a profound sense of shame, a deep-seated guilt for being an instrument in this abhorrent process. He was the one who had brought her here, the stoic cargo pilot who prided himself on efficiency and adherence to protocol. Now, his efficiency meant delivering a sentient being to what could only be described as torture. The transport crew signaled for Kalen to complete the transfer protocols. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, he activated his datapad, authorizing the handover of the box, of Lyra, to the Institute. The confirmation chime on his datapad felt like a death knell. He watched as the grav sled carried the box further into the research sector, past another set of heavy doors, until it vanished from his sight. He felt Lyra's presence, her terror, dimming, fading, as if the very walls of the facility were dampening her connection to him. Her last mental impression was a wave of overwhelming despair, a silent scream that echoed in his mind long after she was gone. Kalen stood there, amidst the sterile whiteness and the hum of machinery, feeling utterly hollowed out. The act of handing over the box, of fulfilling his duty, felt like the greatest betrayal of his life. He had made a terrible mistake, a moral compromise that left an indelible stain on his soul. The stoic cargo pilot was gone, replaced by a man burdened by an unbearable guilt. The bitter taste of betrayal lingered on Kalen's tongue, even as he made his way back to the relative sanctuary of the Stardust Drifter. Each step down the gleaming, empty corridors of the Xylos Institute felt heavy, burdened by the silent scream of Lyra's despair. He replayed the scene in his mind, a torturous loop of sterile rooms, clinical voices, and the final, agonizing moment the box disappeared from view. He could still feel the echo of her last desperate plea, a faint whisper of, "Please, don't leave me," reverberating through his consciousness, fading into the oppressive silence of the facility. Regret, a sensation he rarely allowed himself to indulge in, now consumed him, a gnawing ache in his chest. He should have acted, should have found a way, despite the risks, despite the rules he lived by. He had been a cog in a dehumanizing machine, and the knowledge of his complicity was almost unbearable. Back in his cockpit, the familiar controls and the comforting hum of his ship felt alien, tainted by his recent actions. He slumped into his pilot's chair, staring blankly at the dark expanse of space visible through the viewport. He was supposed to be relieved, the delivery complete, his payment secured. Instead, a profound emptiness settled over him, heavier than any cargo he had ever transported. He had delivered more than just a box. He had delivered a sentient being to an unknown, terrifying fate. The stoic mask he wore had shattered, revealing a man racked with guilt. Every fiber of his being screamed at the injustice, the horrific morality of what he had just done. His gaze fell upon the cargo bay hatch, the place where the box had rested, now empty. He felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to examine the area. It was illogical, pointless even, but a flicker of something beyond reason guided him. He walked slowly back into the cargo bay, his boots clanking softly on the metal deck. He ran his hand along the floor where the box had been, a vague hope blossoming in his chest that Lyra might have left some trace, some sign that she knew he hadn't fully abandoned her. He found nothing obvious. The metal was smooth, clean, devoid of any marks. But then, as his fingers brushed the polished surface, his mind registered a faint impression. It wasn't visible to the naked eye, not a scratch or a dent, but a feeling, a subtle vibration that resonated with Lyra's energy signature. He knelt, bringing his eyes closer to the deck, and then he saw it. Not a physical mark, but a psychic etching, an almost imperceptible glyph shimmering faintly, visible only to those sensitive enough to perceive it. It was tiny, intricate, and pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible warmth. Lyra. She had left him a message, a beacon of her unique ability, a testament to her resilience even in the face of despair. It was a complex array of interconnected symbols, alien and beautiful, that spoke not in words, but in pure intent. It wasn't a cry for help, not explicitly. Instead, it was a subtle confirmation of her abilities, a demonstration of her power to influence matter on an almost atomic level, to leave a mark where none should exist. It was a declaration that she was not powerless, that she was fighting, and more importantly, that she believed he could help her. The glyph pulsed, and Kalen felt a rush of information, a temporary, almost ethereal feeling that transcended direct communication. It was a fragment of a memory, a quick impression of Lyra pushing against the internal dampeners of the box, focusing all her dwindling energy to leave this one, minuscule mark. Her message, conveyed through this extraordinary, almost magical imprint, wasn't just a plea, it was an urgent call to action. It filled him with a renewed sense of purpose, igniting a spark where only ashes of regret had been moments before. She wasn't just asking him to save her, she was telling him she believed he could. This tiny, invisible glyph, a desperate act of defiance from a sentient being imprisoned, planted the seed of a decision in Kalen's weary soul. He would intervene. He would find a way to get her out. His life as a simple cargo hauler was irrevocably over. His life as a simple cargo hauler was irrevocably over. The realization hit Kalen with the force of a supernova, burning away the last vestiges of his old identity. The faint, glowing glyph on the cargo bay floor, a testament to Lyra's indomitable spirit, pulsed with a silent promise. He would intervene. He had to intervene. The image of Lyra, classified as Specimen 7, being prepared for invasive study, ignited a cold fury within him, a stark contrast to his usual stoicism. This was no longer about duty or profit, it was about rectifying a profound wrong, a moral imperative that dwarfed any fear of consequences. He knew the risks were monumental, but the alternative, living with the crushing weight of his complicity, was simply unthinkable. Kalen retreated to his ship's cockpit, his mind racing through possibilities. The Stardust Drifter was a cargo freighter, not equipped for clandestine operations, but Kalen knew its systems intimately, every hidden access panel, every emergency override. He began to formulate a plan, leveraging his extensive knowledge of spaceport logistics and Xylos Institute's known operational procedures. He mentally reconstructed the layout of the facility, recalling every corridor, every security checkpoint he had passed during the delivery. His memory, usually relied upon for flight paths and manifest details, now became a weapon, mapping out potential vulnerabilities. He considered the time of day, the shift changes, the routine patrols, all the minutiae that could be exploited. Lyra's subtle ability to nudge things might be their only real advantage, a wild card in a heavily stacked deck. His first step was to gather resources. Discreetly using secure, untraceable channels, Kalen began acquiring schematics of the Xylos Institute. He knew a few contacts in the underbelly of the space lanes, individuals who dealt in illicit information and questionable services. There was Jax, a data broker with a penchant for high-stakes gambling, who could likely access restricted architectural plans. Then there was Lena, a former security systems engineer who now ran a disreputable repair shop, known for her ability to bypass even the most advanced firewalls. He sent encrypted messages, vague requests that hinted at a substantial payout without revealing the true nature of his mission. He needed to be cautious. Any leak of his intentions would lead to immediate capture and likely Lyra's certain demise. While waiting for responses from his contacts, Kalen started searching for weaknesses within the Institute's public-facing security protocols. He accessed public records, news archives, and even obscure academic papers that mentioned Xylos 7. He learned that the facility had recently upgraded its external perimeter defenses, but little was said about internal security, a common practice for institutions that prioritized secrecy over transparency. He focused on entry and exit points for maintenance crews, garbage disposal routes, and cargo deliveries, anywhere that might offer an unconventional way in or out. He spent hours cross-referencing information, building a comprehensive, albeit theoretical, model of the Institute's security network. His unusual lingering presence in the orbital dock, however, did not go unnoticed. Kalen, typically a swift and efficient operator, was now spending far more time than necessary docked at Xylos 7. He received a polite but firm communication from the spaceport's traffic control, inquiring about his extended stay. "Is there an issue with your vessel, Captain Kalen? You have exceeded your allotted docking time by 3.7 standard hours." He fabricated an excuse about requiring unscheduled component recalibration, a plausible if slightly inconvenient delay. He could feel the eyes on him, not just from the official channels, but from the Institute personnel moving through the dock, their gazes lingering a fraction too long on the Stardust Drifter. His attempts to gather information, even discreetly, were raising suspicion. He saw a security officer from the Institute pass his ship, making a point of stopping to adjust a perfectly aligned panel on the dock wall, all the while casting a sidelong glance at Kalen's freighter. The encounter sent a chill down his spine. They were watching him. His window of opportunity was closing rapidly, and he knew he had to act soon, before their suspicion turned into certainty. The game had begun. The game had begun, and Kalen knew he was playing against formidable opponents. The very next standard cycle, he initiated his plan. The Xylos Institute operated on a rigid schedule, and Kalen, with his newly acquired, illicit schematics, had identified a brief window during the early morning shift change, a period of slightly disorganized transition between the night and day crews, when vigilance was at its lowest. He fabricated a maintenance issue, a critical sensor array on the Stardust Drifter supposedly requiring external calibration that could only be performed from the facility's maintenance catwalks adjacent to his docking bay. It was a flimsy cover story, but just plausible enough, given the inherent complexities of deep space vessels. The tension was a palpable, icy knot in his stomach as he suited up in a standard-issue maintenance uniform, trying to project an air of mundane purpose. He carried a toolkit ostensibly for his repairs, but secretly containing an array of custom-built bypass tools and a highly encrypted comms device. Once cleared by a distracted security guard, Kalen moved with a practiced, almost unnerving calm. The facility, which had seemed so imposing during his delivery, now felt like a giant, sleeping beast he was attempting to sneak past. His internal comms device, tuned to a frequency only Lyra's abilities could interact with, remained silent, a testament to the effectiveness of her containment. He hadn't expected direct verbal communication, but he hoped for guidance, a subtle nudge from her. As he navigated the maze of pristine white corridors, feigning interest in various innocuous panels, a faint, almost subliminal push in his mind urged him left instead of right. He dismissed it at first, attributing it to his own heightened senses, but then another, stronger impulse guided his hand to a specific access panel, one his schematics indicated was a lesser-used utility conduit, bypassing a heavily monitored main thoroughfare. It was Lyra. Her subtle empathic abilities, weakened though they were by her containment, were guiding him, an ethereal compass leading him deeper into the labyrinthine facility. He felt her anxiety, a distant thrumming of fear that intensified when he neared a patrol route, and then a calming reassurance as he turned away, avoiding detection. She was painting a mental map for him, highlighting pressure points, suggesting paths of least resistance. He learned to trust these impulses instinctively, his logical mind giving way to a primal connection with the alien consciousness. Her guidance was invaluable, allowing him to slip past laser grids he hadn't seen, to halt his approach before a security camera's cyclical sweep caught his outline. Kalen encountered several close calls, each one sending a jolt of adrenaline through him. Once, he ducked into a service closet just as a patrol of Institute enforcers, their heavy boots thudding rhythmically, passed his hiding place, their conversations about trivial shift duties echoing off the polished walls. He held his breath, Lyra's mental warning a sharp, insistent spike in his mind. Another time, as he approached a junction leading to the deeper research sectors, an automated drone whirred into view, its optical sensors scanning the corridor. Lyra's guidance urged him to freeze, to blend into the shadows cast by a large equipment locker. The drone paused, its red eye lingering on his position for an agonizing moment before continuing its patrol, seemingly satisfied. Kalen felt Lyra's relief, a wave of calming warmth washing over his own frayed nerves. These near misses hammered home the sheer danger of his mission. One wrong move, one missed mental cue, and it would all be over. But Lyra's guiding presence, even in her weakened state, gave him strength, a sense of shared purpose that transcended species and circumstance. He was no longer alone in this impossible endeavor. He was Lyra's last hope, and she was his unseen navigator through the heart of the enemy. The game had begun, and Kalen knew he was playing against formidable opponents. The very next standard cycle, he initiated his plan. The Xylos Institute operated on a rigid schedule, and Kalen, with his newly acquired, illicit schematics, had identified a brief window during the early morning shift change, a period of slightly disorganized transition between the night and day crews, when vigilance was at its lowest. He fabricated a maintenance issue, a critical sensor array on the Stardust Drifter supposedly requiring external calibration that could only be performed from the facility's maintenance catwalks adjacent to his docking bay. It was a flimsy cover story, but just plausible enough, given the inherent complexities of deep space vessels. The tension was a palpable, icy knot in his stomach as he suited up in a standard-issue maintenance uniform, trying to project an air of mundane purpose. He carried a toolkit, ostensibly for his repairs, but secretly containing an array of custom-built bypass tools and a highly encrypted comms device. Once cleared by a distracted security guard, Kalen moved with a practiced, almost unnerving calm. The facility, which had seemed so imposing during his delivery, now felt like a giant, sleeping beast he was attempting to sneak past. His internal comms device, tuned to a frequency only Lyra's abilities could interact with, remained silent, a testament to the effectiveness of her containment. He hadn't expected direct verbal communication, but he hoped for guidance, a subtle nudge from her. As he navigated the maze of pristine white corridors, feigning interest in various innocuous panels, a faint, almost subliminal push in his mind urged him left instead of right. He dismissed it at first, attributing it to his own heightened senses, but then another, stronger impulse guided his hand to a specific access panel, one his schematics indicated was a lesser-used utility conduit, bypassing a heavily monitored main thoroughfare. It was Lyra. Her subtle empathic abilities, weakened though they were by her containment, were guiding him, an ethereal compass leading him deeper into the labyrinthine facility. He felt her anxiety, a distant thrumming of fear that intensified when he neared a patrol route, and then a calming reassurance as he turned away, avoiding detection. She was painting a mental map for him, highlighting pressure points, suggesting paths of least resistance. He learned to trust these impulses instinctively, his logical mind giving way to a primal connection with the alien consciousness. Her guidance was invaluable, allowing him to slip past laser grids he hadn't seen, to halt his approach before a security camera's cyclical sweep caught his outline. Kalen encountered several close calls, each one sending a jolt of adrenaline through him. Once, he ducked into a service closet just as a patrol of Institute enforcers, their heavy boots thudding rhythmically, passed his hiding place, their conversations about trivial shift duties echoing off the polished walls. He held his breath, Lyra's mental warning a sharp, insistent spike in his mind. Another time, as he approached a junction leading to the deeper research sectors, an automated drone whirred into view, its optical sensors scanning the corridor. Lyra's guidance urged him to freeze, to blend into the shadows cast by a large equipment locker. The drone paused, its red eye lingering on his position for an agonizing moment before continuing its patrol, seemingly satisfied. Kalen felt Lyra's relief, a wave of calming warmth washing over his own frayed nerves. These near misses hammered home the sheer danger of his mission. One wrong move, one missed mental cue, and it would all be over. But Lyra's guiding presence, even in her weakened state, gave him strength, a sense of shared purpose that transcended species and circumstance. He was no longer alone in this impossible endeavor. He was Lyra's last hope, and she was his unseen navigator through the heart of the enemy. With Lyra's subtle, yet insistent, guidance, Kalen reached the research sector he had seen on the schematics. The air here felt different, charged, almost heavy with suppressed energy. Lyra's psychic signals, which had been faint and distant, now pulsed with a stronger, though still deeply muffled, presence. He felt her nearby, a beacon of trembling light in the oppressive darkness of the facility. Following her ever-clearer mental prompts, Kalen found himself standing before a heavy, reinforced door, unmarked save for a small, blinking red light. This was it. Her cell. It was a cold, sterile containment unit, even more isolated than he had imagined, designed not just to hold, but to utterly obliterate all sensory input and suppress any external psionic emanations. Through the psychic link, now stronger due to their proximity, Lyra began to reveal more about her species' unique abilities. We don't think like you do, Kalen," she projected, her thoughts forming a more coherent stream in his mind. "We are woven into the very fabric of the cosmos, able to manipulate the subtle energy fields that bind reality. Telepathy is merely a byproduct, a basic form of communication. Our true power lies in resonance, in harmonizing with the universal flow. These humans, they call it psionic manipulation, but it's more like singing with the universe. It makes us invaluable, yes, but also incredibly vulnerable if our songs are silenced." She explained that the containment unit was specifically designed to sever that connection, to create a dissonant field that would isolate her from her natural abilities, effectively turning her into a mere biological specimen. Together, Kalen and Lyra began to devise a strategy to bypass the cell's advanced security. Kalen, consulting the schematics on his small, discrete datapad, identified the primary energy conduits and the complex lock mechanisms, a multi-layered system of electromagnetic seals and kinetic baffles. "I can probably overload the primary lock," Kalen projected mentally, "but it will trigger alarms. It's too robust for a clean bypass. And the secondary system looks like a psionic dampener field, specifically designed for someone like you." Lyra's response was immediate. "If you can disrupt the primary, even for a moment, I might be able to create enough resonance to overload the dampener. It will be painful, and it will alert them, but it's our only chance." Their plan, forged in urgency and desperation, relied on Kalen's engineering skills to create a momentary weakness, and Lyra's subtle energy manipulation to exploit that weakness, creating an opening in her seemingly impregnable prison. The weight of their combined hope now rested on the success of this audacious, desperate act. The weight of their combined hope now rested on the success of this audacious, desperate act. Kalen nodded, a silent acknowledgement to Lyra. His fingers, guided by the internal schematics he now held firmly in his mind, deftly worked on the cell's exterior access panel. He bypassed the initial magnetic locks with a burst of finely tuned electromagnetic pulse from his modified toolkit. A soft click echoed in the sterile corridor, followed by a barely perceptible shimmer across the durasteel surface of the door. "Now, Lyra," he urged mentally, pouring all his focus into preparing for the next step. Lyra, still weakened and confined, responded with a sudden, intense surge of energy that Kalen felt like a jolt directly through his mind. A high-pitched whine emanated from within the cell, intensifying rapidly as Lyra pushed against the psionic dampeners. The red light on the door flickered wildly, then sparked, and with a deafening crack, the heavy durasteel door shuddered violently before sliding open a few inches, revealing a gap. Immediately, the alarm shrieked, a piercing, insistent wail that shattered the oppressive silence of the research sector. Red lights flashed maniacally, painting the pristine white walls in a terrifying crimson glow. "Breach. Research Sector 7, Containment Unit 3. A synthesized voice blared over the intercom, its urgency sending a fresh wave of adrenaline through Kalen. Lyra, a small, ethereal figure, barely bigger than Kalen's forearm, floated weakly through the gap in the door, her translucent skin shimmering with residual energy. She looked frail, exhausted, her large, dark eyes filled with a mixture of terror and profound gratitude. "Go! Now!" Kalen shouted, his voice rough with urgency, as he grabbed her gently, tucking her carefully into a pouch inside his maintenance uniform. He knew the Institute's response time would be brutal. Footsteps pounded in the distance, growing louder with terrifying speed. Guards, their energy rifles charged and ready, rounded the far corner of the corridor, their faces grim, their movements precise. "Freeze! Unauthorized personnel!" one of them yelled, his voice amplified by his helmet. Kalen didn't hesitate. He pulled out a small, spherical device from his toolkit and hurled it behind him. It detonated with a concussive flash, momentarily disorienting the lead guards and filling the corridor with thick, non-toxic smoke. He didn't wait to see the effect. Already sprinting down a side corridor Lyra had mentally highlighted as a less monitored escape route. The chase was frantic. Kalen, now fully committed, became a whirlwind of tactical maneuvers and quick thinking. He slammed emergency bulkheads shut behind them, slowing their pursuers. He rerouted power systems to disable specific security cameras, creating temporary blind spots. Lyra, though still weak, was a vital partner, guiding him through the labyrinthine facility. She sensed approaching patrols before Kalen could hear them, subtly nudging him to take an unexpected turn or to duck into a narrow maintenance shaft. Kalen, despite the overwhelming pressure, felt a surge of protectiveness. He had been a simple hauler, valuing his solitude, but now this tiny, vulnerable alien had ignited something fiercely primal within him. He would not let them recapture her. They navigated through ventilation shafts, squeezed through service tunnels, and slid down emergency chutes, always listening to Lyra's subtle direction, always one step ahead of the relentless pursuit. The facility's alarms continued their incessant wail, a constant reminder of their precarious situation. Laser fire occasionally singed the air near them, followed by the heavy thud of guards impacting newly closed bulkheads. Kalen used his knowledge of the facility's layout to create diversions, throwing discarded toolboxes down stairwells to draw attention, triggering false alarms in other sectors, anything to buy them precious seconds. Each move was calculated, fueled by a desperate need to protect the fragile life now entrusted to his care. Lyra's fear was still present, a constant hum, but now, mixed with it, Kalen felt a growing sense of trust and fragile hope. They were in this together, and Kalen, the former stoic, was fighting with every fiber of his being. The alarms continued their incessant wail, a constant reminder of their precarious situation, but Kalen pushed forward, Lyra's tiny form cradled securely within his maintenance suit. He felt the rapid beat of her fragile heart against his own, a rhythm of sheer terror interwoven with a burgeoning trust. Laser fire occasionally singed the air near them, followed by the heavy thud of guards impacting newly closed bulkheads. The shouts of their pursuers echoed through the corridors, a relentless chorus of fury and determination. Kalen used his knowledge of the facility's layout to create diversions, throwing discarded toolboxes down stairwells to draw attention, triggering false alarms in other sectors, anything to buy them precious seconds. Each move was calculated, fueled by a desperate need to protect the fragile life now entrusted to his care. Lyra's fear was still present, a constant hum, but now, mixed with it, Kalen felt a growing sense of trust and fragile hope. They were in this together, and Kalen, the former stoic, was fighting with every fiber of his being. Their path back to the hangar was a blur of frantic motion, narrow escapes, and adrenaline-fueled decisions. Lyra's mental guidance was precise, directing him through secondary access tunnels and ventilation shafts that sliced precious minutes off their escape route. The research sector gave way to the logistics hub, then the administrative wing, each area seemingly less fortified than the last, but still teeming with Institute personnel now alerted to the breach. Security drones, usually relegated to patrol duties, now swarmed like angry bees, their red optical sensors fixed on Kalen's position. He dodged a stun blast that sizzled past his ear, the air crackling with ionized particles. He could hear the heavy rhythmic thud of an Institute patrol vehicle gaining on them, its sirens cutting through the general alarm, its mounted stun cannon locking onto his heat signature. "We're almost there," Kalen mentally projected to Lyra, his lungs burning, his muscles aching. He could see the faint outline of the hangar bay doors ahead, a distant promise of salvation. But the patrol vehicle was too fast, too heavily armed. Its stun cannon charged, emitting a low, dangerous hum. Kalen knew he wouldn't make it to the hangar entrance before it fired. He swerved abruptly, ducking behind a stack of oversized cargo containers. Thinking fast, he pulled a small, powerful EMP grenade from his toolkit, a last resort item he hadn't thought he'd need. Without a second thought, he lobbed it directly at the patrol vehicle's lead thruster. The EMP detonated with a silent flash, followed by a shower of sparks and a screech of grinding metal as the vehicle lost power, skidding violently into a nearby wall. It bought them a precious few seconds, a desperate maneuver that made all the difference. "Go! Go! Go!" Kalen urged himself, bursting from cover, the hangar doors now directly ahead. He slammed his palm against the emergency release panel, and with a protesting groan of hydraulics, the massive doors began to retract. Figures in white lab coats and security uniforms scattered, their panicked cries lost in the din of the alarms. Kalen burst into the hangar bay, sprinting towards the Stardust Drifter, its gangplank still lowered, an open maw inviting them to freedom. He scrambled aboard, Lyra still clutched tightly against him. He lunged into the cockpit, slamming the emergency button to retract the gangplank and seal the hatch. Before the hatch was even fully secured, Kalen was already powering up the engines. The Stardust Drifter rumbled to life, its thrusters igniting with a roar that shook the entire hangar. He wrestled the controls, bringing the heavy freighter off the ground, ascending rapidly towards the hangar ceiling. But the Institute wasn't giving up that easily. Ground-based turrets, previously concealed, rose from the hangar floor, spitting furious streams of laser fire. Impact alarms blared across the cockpit as the Drifter's shields absorbed the punishing barrage. "They're hitting us hard, Lyra!" Kalen grunted, struggling to maintain control amidst the violent shaking. He could feel Lyra, weak as she was, focusing her energy. A faint, shimmering distortion appeared around the Drifter's port side, just as another volley of laser fire slammed into their shields. The impact felt strangely dampened, deflected somehow. Lyra was subtly influencing the energy fields, bending the incoming rounds, guiding them away from critical systems. It was a minuscule effect, not enough to stop the assault entirely, but it eased the strain on the shields, buying Kalen the precious milliseconds he needed to maneuver. Her act of defiance, her desperate effort to protect them, was a powerful confirmation of her trust in him. He wasn't just her jailer turned rescuer, he was her only hope, and she was fighting with him, every painful inch of the way. With a final, explosive burst of thrust, the Stardust Drifter tore free from the hangar, leaving the enraged, flashing lights of the Xylos Institute behind, rocketing skyward through the planetary atmosphere. With a final, explosive burst of thrust, the Stardust Drifter tore free from the hangar, leaving the enraged, flashing lights of the Xylos Institute behind, rocketing skyward through the planetary atmosphere. Kalen wrestled the controls, pushing the freighter's engines to their absolute limit. The ship shuddered under the strain, the alarms still blaring, but the intensity of the incoming fire lessened with every meter gained. He set a course vector away from Xylos 7, pouring every ounce of power into the jump drives, bypassing the usual pre-jump diagnostics. He didn't have time for protocols, not with the Institute's pursued vessels undoubtedly scrambling to intercept. "Hold on, Lyra!" he muttered, his voice hoarse from exertion, as he slammed the activation sequence for hyperspace. The stars outside the viewport elongated, blurring into streaks of pure light, then exploded into the shimmering tunnel of hyperspace. The familiar, disorienting sensation of nonlinear travel enveloped the ship, and with it, an immediate, profound silence. The alarms ceased, the thruster vibrations smoothed into a gentle hum. They were safe, for now. Kalen slumped back in his seat, exhaling a long, ragged breath, the adrenaline slowly seeping from his bones. He reached into his maintenance uniform and carefully pulled out Lyra, placing her on the co-pilot's console. She was still weak, her translucent form glowing faintly in the dim cockpit light, her large eyes fixed on him with an intensity that spoke volumes. In the quiet solitude of hyperspace, a journey that could take hours or days depending on their destination, Lyra began to recover. The unique properties of hyperspace, detached from the dissonant fields of real space, seemed to allow her abilities to stabilize, to draw strength from the ambient energy. Her thoughts, clearer now, flowed into Kalen's mind, no longer fragmented whispers but coherent narratives. She spoke of her people, the Lumina, a species of pure energy beings, connected to the universal consciousness, living in harmony with a hidden, vibrant world nestled deep within an uncharted nebula. They communicated through shared consciousness, through resonant frequencies, and rarely encountered other species, intentionally maintaining their isolation to preserve their peaceful existence. Lyra then recounted her ordeal in chilling detail, confirming Kalen's darkest suspicions. She had been on a solitary pilgrimage, a spiritual journey to a particularly resonant celestial body, when she was ensnared by a specialized containment field, designed to capture beings of her unique energy signature. The Institute's researchers, cold and methodical, had subjected her to various experiments, probing her capabilities, trying to understand the source of her psionic resonance, not for scientific enlightenment, but for weaponization. She described the sensory deprivation, the constant analysis of her energy output, the attempts to replicate her connection to the universal flow for their own nefarious purposes. The thought of it sent a fresh wave of anger through Kalen, his hands clenching into fists. As Lyra shared her story, a profound transformation began to unfurl within Kalen. His rigid adherence to rules, his lifetime of stoicism, began to soften, dissolving under the weight of Lyra's innocence and suffering. He had always seen the galaxy in terms of cargo manifests and profit margins, a predictable, ordered universe. Now he saw the raw, brutal injustice, the desperate beauty of life fighting for survival. The fierce protectiveness he had felt during their escape solidified into an unshakable loyalty. This small, fragile being, whom he had nearly delivered to her doom, had fundamentally altered his perspective. His purpose was no longer just delivering cargo. It was protecting Lyra, ensuring her safety, safeguarding the knowledge within her. He felt a newfound sense of purpose, a burning conviction that transcended his former, solitary existence. The universe, once cold and indifferent, was now infused with a profound moral clarity. He was no longer just a cargo pilot. He was a guardian, a protector, bound by an unseen oath to this extraordinary alien. Kalen, the former stoic, now a man redefined by purpose, found himself staring into the vast, swirling vortex of hyperspace, a journey spanning light years and redefining his very existence. With Lyra slowly regaining her full strength, her vibrant, translucent form now hovering gracefully beside him, the immediate urgency of escape gave way to the pressing question of their next steps. Lyra's thoughts, now flowing with increasing clarity and emotional depth, conveyed a profound longing for her home. "I must return to my people, Kalen," she projected, her mental voice resonating with a gentle urgency that tugged at his soul. "They must be warned. The Institute, they will not stop. They seek to exploit, to weaponize the very essence of life." She described her home world, a planet veiled within a dense, uncharted nebula, known only to the Lumina and perhaps a handful of ancient, benevolent cosmic travelers. It was a place of unparalleled natural beauty, a sanctuary of peace and a repository of unique knowledge, completely untouched by the aggressive expansion of human civilization. The journey to Lyra's home world was fraught with peril, a cosmic odyssey through untamed space. Kalen, leveraging every ounce of his piloting skill and years of interstellar experience, plotted a course through uncharted star systems, meticulously avoiding known hyperspace lanes that might be monitored by the persistent reach of the Xylos Institute's intelligence networks. He navigated through treacherous asteroid fields, dodged rogue comets, and even ventured into nebulae notorious for their unpredictable gravitational anomalies, all the while guided by Lyra's innate ability to sense safe passages and warn of unseen dangers. She was an invaluable co-pilot, her perception extending beyond Kalen's sophisticated sensors, detecting minute shifts in cosmic energies, guiding them away from potential ambushes or the lingering echoes of Institute patrols. The Stardust Drifter, once a workhorse of routine deliveries, now became a vessel of hope, its sturdy hull a shield against the vast, indifferent cosmos. During these long stretches of silent travel, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the hyperspace engines, a deep, unspoken bond formed between Kalen and Lyra. He found himself sharing stories of his solitary life, tales of mundane deliveries that now seemed impossibly distant, of strange alien marketplaces and the quiet majesty of 1,000 sunrises viewed from a cockpit. Lyra, in turn, shared more about the Lumina's philosophy, their connection to the universal consciousness, their reverence for all life. She taught him to perceive the subtle energies of the universe, to feel the gentle hum of distant stars, to truly listen to the cosmic symphony. Kalen, a man who had once valued order and predictability above all else, found a companionship he never knew he needed, a profound connection that transcended species and communication barriers. Lyra, once a terrified prisoner, found in Kalen not just a protector, but a friend, a steadfast anchor in a bewildering and often cruel galaxy. His presence became a source of comfort, a silent promise of safety. He learned to interpret her subtle shifts in energy as emotions, understanding her joy, her sorrow, and her unwavering determination. He had spent his life avoiding emotional entanglement, finding solace in logic and solitude. Now, he found an unexpected richness in this nascent relationship, a warmth that filled the cavernous void of his long-held emotional desert. The universe, once a map of routes and destinations, transformed into a tapestry of shared experience, of trust, and of a burgeoning, profound affection that promised to reshape his future in ways he could never have imagined. The universe, once a map of routes and destinations, transformed into a tapestry of shared experience, of trust, and of a burgeoning, profound affection that promised to reshape his future in ways he could never have imagined. After what felt like an eternity navigating the treacherous, uncharted pathways of the cosmos, the Stardust Drifter finally emerged from hyperspace. Kalen had spent countless cycles at the helm, his systems pushed to their limits, his mind focused entirely on Lyra's subtle guidance. The view that unfolded before them was unlike anything Kalen had ever witnessed. It was Lyra's home world, a sight of breathtaking, pristine beauty. Nestled within the swirling, incandescent gas clouds of a vibrant nebula, the planet itself was a jewel. Its surface shimmered with impossible colors, a mosaic of bioluminescent forests, crystal mountains that pierced a sky painted with auroras, and oceans that pulsed with soft, internal light. There were no visible cities, no sprawling industrial complexes, no signs of the aggressive, resource-hungry expansion that characterized human worlds. It was a testament to a harmonious existence, a living ecosystem of light and energy that radiated peace. Kalen felt Lyra stir beside him, her mental presence expanding, a wave of profound joy and relief washing over him, mirroring the awe that bloomed in his own chest. As the Stardust Drifter descended slowly through the upper atmosphere, shimmering forms, similar to Lyra but larger, more vibrant, converged from the planet below. They were Lumina, Lyra's people, ethereal beings of pure light and energy, their movements graceful and fluid. They enveloped the Drifter in a gentle, welcoming embrace of light, guiding it towards a vast, crystalline clearing. Kalen carefully lowered the landing gear, the ship settling softly onto ground that felt alive beneath them. When the ramp lowered, Lyra, now radiating with renewed strength, floated out, gracefully reuniting with her people. Their greetings were not with words, but with an exchange of luminous energy, a cascade of shared thought and emotion that Kalen perceived as a symphony of welcome. Then, their attention turned to him. A collective consciousness, gentle yet powerful, enveloped Kalen. He felt a wave of profound gratitude, of reverence for his actions, for his courage and sacrifice. They understood his role, his journey, his defiance of his own species to protect one of theirs. He was not just a delivery driver, he was a liberator, a hero in their eyes. The warmth of their collective thought was like nothing he had ever experienced, a complete acceptance that bypassed all his carefully constructed defenses. Standing there on this extraordinary world, surrounded by beings of pure light and compassion, Kalen faced a crossroads. He could return to his old life, to the lonely circuits of cargo deliveries, to the predictable hum of the Stardust Drifter carrying inanimate objects across indifferent space. He could resume his routine, erase this extraordinary chapter, and try to forget the profound shifts within him. But the thought felt utterly hollow, like an echo in an empty chamber. His old life, once a comfortable refuge of solitude and order, now seemed bleak, devoid of meaning, a pale shadow compared to the vibrant, interconnected existence he had glimpsed. He looked at Lyra, her form radiating quiet contentment amidst her people, then back at the familiar, if suddenly alien, interior of his ship. The choice was clear. The universe had offered him more than a delivery, it had offered him a destiny. He knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his soul, that his path was now intertwined with Lyra and her people. His days of being a solitary cargo pilot were truly over. He had found something far more precious than profit or predictability. He had found purpose. The universe, once a map of routes and destinations, transformed into a tapestry of shared experience, of trust, and of a burgeoning, profound affection that promised to reshape his future in ways he could never have imagined. After what felt like an eternity navigating the treacherous, uncharted pathways of the cosmos, the Stardust Drifter finally emerged from hyperspace. Kalen had spent countless cycles at the helm, his systems pushed to their limits, his mind focused entirely on Lyra's subtle guidance. The view that unfolded before them was unlike anything Kalen had ever witnessed. It was Lyra's home world, a sight of breathtaking, pristine beauty. Nestled within the swirling, incandescent gas clouds of a vibrant nebula, the planet itself was a jewel. Its surface shimmered with impossible colors, a mosaic of bioluminescent forests, crystal mountains that pierced the sky painted with auroras, and oceans that pulsed with soft, internal light. There were no visible cities, no sprawling industrial complexes, no signs of the aggressive, resource-hungry expansion that characterized human worlds. It was a testament to a harmonious existence, a living ecosystem of light and energy that radiated peace. Kalen felt Lyra stir beside him, her mental presence expanding, a wave of profound joy and relief washing over him, mirroring the awe that bloomed in his own chest. As the Stardust Drifter descended slowly through the upper atmosphere, shimmering forms, similar to Lyra but larger, more vibrant, converged from the planet below. They were Lumina, Lyra's people, ethereal beings of pure light and energy, their movements graceful and fluid. They enveloped the Drifter in a gentle, welcoming embrace of light, guiding it towards a vast, crystalline clearing. Kalen carefully lowered the landing gear, the ship settling softly onto ground that felt alive beneath them. When the ramp lowered, Lyra, now radiating with renewed strength, floated out, gracefully reuniting with her people. Their greetings were not with words, but with an exchange of luminous energy, a cascade of shared thought and emotion that Kalen perceived as a symphony of welcome. Then, their attention turned to him. A collective consciousness, gentle yet powerful, enveloped Kalen. He felt a wave of profound gratitude, of reverence for his actions, for his courage and sacrifice. They understood his role, his journey, his defiance of his own species to protect one of theirs. He was not just a delivery driver, he was a liberator, a hero in their eyes. The warmth of their collective thought was like nothing he had ever experienced, a complete acceptance that bypassed all his carefully constructed defenses. Standing thereon this extraordinary world, surrounded by beings of pure light and compassion, Kalen faced a crossroads. He could return to his old life, to the lonely circuits of cargo deliveries, to the predictable hum of the Stardust Drifter carrying inanimate objects across indifferent space. He could resume his routine, erase this extraordinary chapter, and try to forget the profound shifts within him. But the thought felt utterly hollow, like an echo in an empty chamber. His old life, once a comfortable refuge of solitude and order, now seemed bleak, devoid of meaning, a pale shadow compared to the vibrant, interconnected existence he had glimpsed. He looked at Lyra, her form radiating quiet contentment amidst her people, then back at the familiar, if suddenly alien, interior of his ship. The choice was clear. The universe had offered him more than a delivery, it had offered him a destiny. He knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his soul, that his path was now intertwined with Lyra and her people. His days of being a solitary cargo pilot were truly over. He had found something far more precious than profit or predictability. He had found purpose. Kalen chose to stay. He would dedicate his skills, his ship, and his unwavering resolve to protecting the Lumina and ensuring no other sentient being suffered the fate Lyra had narrowly escaped. The Stardust Drifter, no longer a mere cargo vessel, was refitted with enhanced sensors and cloaking technology, becoming an unofficial guardian, patrolling the uncharted fringes of the nebula, a silent sentinel against exploitation. He became a bridge between two worlds, sharing their advanced knowledge of interstellar travel and defense, while learning from them the profound wisdom of interconnectedness and peace. His time with the Lumina softened his rough edges, replacing his grim stoicism with a quiet strength born of belonging. The universe, once a canvas for solitary journeys and transactional exchanges, was now filled with meaning, a profound connection to a community that had embraced him. He learned to appreciate the subtle, energetic currents that flowed through all life, a deeper understanding of Lyra's singing with the universe. He discovered that some deliveries were indeed more than just cargo. They were destinies, moments that irrevocably altered the trajectory of a life, guiding it toward true purpose and an unexpected, yet deeply fulfilling, home. The silent void was now filled with the gentle hum of belonging, and the cargo pilot who once valued order above all else, found his greatest joy in the beautiful, chaotic, and utterly unpredictable dance of life.